Do you want the honest truth about burnout today? And do you want to have a stark and honest conversation about its effects? Well, if you answered yes, you're in the right place because two-thirds of employees today in the modern American workforce are burned out. This, according to research conducted by Moodle in partnership with Censuswide. It's estimated that a total of 66% of employees reported to being burned out in 2025. What is even more striking is that younger generations are being hit the hardest, with 81% of those 18 to 24 and 83% of those between the ages of 25 and 34 reporting burnout, compared to just 49% of those who are 55 years and older. At the same time, debates over remote work continue to divide organizations despite its clear evidence that flexibility plays a crucial and critical role in reducing stress and burnout for professions like caregivers and individuals with disabilities who benefit the most from remote work. So the question is, what's broken and how do we fix it? On the podcast, Work Sucks, but I Like It, my friend Tony Tenaglier challenges the outdated definition of work as simply a 9-to-5 job. Instead, he explores leadership and work through a broader lens, one which is inspired by physics. Work, which is a force multiplier by displacement, or, in other words, work is anything that creates movement, impact, or progress in your life. He's a materials science engineer, a quality leader, an author, a rock climber, yoga teacher, Lego builder, and podcast host who thrives at the intersection of practical problem solving and a deep theoretical understanding, whether improving casting processes, quality systems, or helping teams navigate complex challenges. His approach blends hands-on experience with analytical rigor to drive meaningful and sustainable solutions grounded in and on. Success isn't a matter of luck. It's a product of good skills, consistent effort, and the mindset you bring to every task. Tony's philosophy in life is how you do anything is how you do everything. And he joined me this week to discuss how we can engineer a brighter and more reliable future of consistent and meaningful work. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Tony, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, my friend, and I'm super excited to talk to you about reducing workplace burnout. It's great to see you, my friend, and happy Thursday to you.
Awesome, man. Let's do it, Kevin.
Absolutely. So, Tony, I wanted to start by asking you about what do you think organizational leaders sort of misconstrue about workplace burnout, and how do you think they should rethink their leadership style when it comes to addressing workplace burnout. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, I think like people are people, right? We're humans. We're not transactions. And I think one of the things we mistake in manufacturing, especially kind of the arena that I play in today, is that yes, we're making widgets that go into planes and cars and whatever industry you're in that you're manufacturing products. But it's like people are going to have days where there's good and bad. They're going to be, I guess that's just acknowledging that, right? And just seeing people as humans is more important than ever, especially this day and age with AI and technology kind of like, I don't say taking over. There's always going to be a need for that human touch, even in a manufacturing sense. I work with things that are automated in the manufacturing floor. People get nervous about AI taking over stuff, but let's face it. I mean, humans designed the robots, they designed AI. And I think for leadership to be successful, for companies to be successful when working with people, which is the nature of all business, we just have to remember that, again, people are human beings. They want to be heard. Call them by their name. That's another simple thing, too, Kevin, that people can do is just call people by their name, look them in the eyes and say, be genuine with your, listening and your responses and just take interest in the person in front of you.
Yeah, and Tony, I'm a huge believer in that you have to invest in the people that you're in charge of leading and really giving them the autonomy to make decisions that affect the entire organization. Because if you do that, people see that we're all rowing in the same boat. So I'm wondering your thoughts on giving employees professional autonomy and the importance behind that, my friend. What are your thoughts there?
Well, Kevin, you said a good word there too, right? Invest. And I think like we think in terms of investing, into buildings, into processes, but you said it so well. You have to invest in people. And so I think like in terms of autonomy, I'm not a micromanager, right? I don't believe that, we should be micromanaging people. To me, you give people a clear goal and an attainable goal too. That's the other thing as well. Like if you want to set people up for success, is I guess what I'm getting at, and especially being a manager again, in my quote unquote, I guess career here with my work in my 9 to 5, it's about again setting up the employees for success so they can do the work on their own. Because I mean, you're a sports journalist, you can appreciate sports analogies. I mean, excuse me, with like a soccer team or a football team, you got to trust the person's doing their job, right? You got to give them that space to make the run, to make the tackle, to kick the ball, to whatever they got to do. And it's like I think this day and age, we want to control things, which is great, because especially from a process standpoint, we want to minimize variation in our processes, but we also want to build in sort of this spontaneous like sort of decision making. Yes, athletes will practice certain drills, to get a certain play down. But let's face it, game time comes, like, shit can hit the fan, and like you got to be able to respond. And that really comes from leadership really setting up each person to be their own sort of entity in their work or playing in a sports field. I think that's just really important.
Yeah, absolutely. No, Tony, I know that you're the host of a podcast called Work Sucks, but I like it. You're also an author and a manufacturing leader with years of experience in high pressure environments, my friend, where burnout is normalized and characterized as just deal with it, my friend. And I'm wondering why you want this to be your zone of genius and why this is so important to you personally, my friend. Tell me more.
Yeah, no, Kevin. I mean, funny enough, like I know you're a podcast veteran here. Like I didn't even know what a podcast was last year. It's 2026 May now. We're recording this, man. And last year I didn't even know what a podcast was. But I love the sort of the conversation. So my girlfriend and I were driving somewhere and she said, "Can we put a podcast on?" And I guess what I'm getting at is when we listened to that episode, I really sort of resonated with how two people, whatever, how many people on the show could connect with one another. And I feel like that's missing today, right? So you mentioned that I am the host of the Work Sucks, But I Like It podcast. And it's really just about connecting with people and their work and just allowing space to say that, I guess I get tired of people saying like, oh, I can't wait for the weekend and I can't wait till I retire. And I'm just thinking in my head, well, what are you going to be doing? Like, you got to be doing something, like, whether you call it work or whatever, you got to do something. And I just want to create the space where it feels safe for people to share what they like about work, what sometimes sucks about work. Because let's face it, like some days, man, as you know, as a podcast, host yourself, it's like, trying to get the technology right, the lighting, the camera, the editing. It sucks sometimes, right? But we love these conversations, right, that we're having with each other, and that's what we come back to. And I think like in terms of work today, we sort of, glamorize just the good things and we don't necessarily always talk about the bad things. One quick example is like, you read self-help books where it's like, 5 steps to being more efficient. Well, sure, I'm all for an optimal process when I put my engineering hat on, but sometimes the process takes more steps. There's going to be more steps, just so it's like I want to recognize both the friction and the frustration with people's work as much as celebrating the victories.
And Tony, I'm curious to ask you your opinion on where do you think we've lost the ability to humanize work and connect with people because we're all, productivity driven, but I think we're losing the emotional, psychological safety of connecting with people. So I'm curious to ask you about where do you think the emotional disconnect of actually connecting with people at work is gone, and how do you think we get that back, my friend?
I mean, Kevin, to be honest with you, man, is getting off our phones. We're becoming so programmed literally from our phones to keep our head down. We can't even look at each other when we're talking. That's why I love about podcasts because you and I are having a good conversation. We don't have our phones in front of us. We're not distracted by other things. We're trying to listen to each other. I think that's where people can really make big strides in their relationships with other people and form these connections that you're kind of alluding to that we've lost by just simply getting off your phone. Like, sure, we got to have our phones, right? It was awesome. You and I connected via pod match. I'm on my phone setting this thing up. So it's great, right? So I'm not saying totally get rid of the phone, but to make sort of, deeper, more genuine connections, if you will, yes, use the phone to set up the transaction of connecting, but then again, just be there with people. And I think like one thing that's overlooked as well, especially in like a manufacturing sort of corporate setting, is that, everything is, again, when you're manufacturing things, it's about transactions. It's about what can be, made with sort of money made and, time isn't lost to, whatever, wasting, just being efficient is my point. And the thing is, though, people, again, as I mentioned earlier, they're going to come in with bad days and good days. And so, one thing that, a term keeps coming up, you might have heard of it, Kevin, is this concept called active listening, right? And the way I like to kind of like paraphrase it sort of on the streets, not a psychological definition here, but just, we have 2 ears and we have one mouth. And so, to me, to build these connections that we've lost for sure, we need to double our listening more than our speaking.
Tony, I'm reminded of what, I'm a old, Judge Judy veteran, and she always says that we have 2 ears and one mouth for a reason, right?
Love it. Love it. All right. Judge Judy. I love that reference. Perfect.
Yeah,
I'll quote it too now.
absolutely, absolutely, my friend. And I know that your work combines psychology and the flow science of leadership and real world experiences and challenge the hustle culture and debunk the myths about burnout and helping people redesign the way they feel about work to prevent them from feeling drained in their life, my friend. So tell me how does psychology rather and flow science help you to accomplish helping people redesign and rethink the way they look at work, my friend? What do you want to share with me there?
Yeah, I'm going to pull kind of, you're a sports journalist, Kevin, right? So I can only imagine in your conversations when you've talked to these athletes and they've told you about games that they've really done well in, right? They find these flow states. And that's what I love studying. So the flow state is like when you're in the zone, right? The basketball player, time stands still and they see the opening, at the basketball rim and they shoot it and they score the, the winning point or whatever when the clock tips winds down or whatever. And so, I've integrated that flow science from a psychology standpoint really into my day. And the way I sort of think of it now is, so flow has four stages. There's the struggle, release, flow, and recovery. So basically, quick example. So if you and I are playing tennis here, we're first time ever, we're struggling to maybe hit the ball, right? We're hitting it kind of back and forth and we're struggling, but we keep showing up, we keep practicing. And then we set it aside. We say, hey, let's take a break. Let's take a break from tennis. Let's go do something else. Maybe we'll come back next week. We'll practice again. And then we pick it up again. We struggle a little more. But then as we keep practicing, as you know, in sports, well, the day comes when things start to align, right? Now I'm really getting good at my forehand and my serve and my backhand and things flow. And the thing about a flow state, though, is it's very taxing on the brain. There's things going on in the brain, certain chemicals that are needed to get into these flow states, and you need to recover. And I think what's missing in the workplace today, when we talk about burnout, is that, again, we treat humans like, okay, they're like a robot. We're going to just produce, produce, produce. But again, if we're looking at the science of flow, and if it has four stages, which it does, we have to realize that in a given day, not everyone's going to be in a flow state all 8 hours of their workday, right? And the way I actually look at the workday is like a soccer game with two halves. I got my first half from whatever, 9 to noon or whatever it is. I get an hour lunch, and then I'm working from 1 to 5 or whatever. And for the second half. And the reason why I say it like that is that the lunchtime is the halftime break, right? The athletes in sports games need a break. Same too with the people, that are working. And I think you talk about redesigning, work to prevent it from draining their lives. We've got to take breaks. And what I mean by break is, don't go on your phone, right? Take a break where it's like, one of the things I love to do, Kevin, is take a nap at lunch. Like, I would literally go in my car, no matter if it's like 10 degrees out, excuse me, Fahrenheit in New Hampshire here in the wintertime, or if it's 100 degrees out in the summertime, I will take a nap in my car every single day when I'm at work. And I think, for, again, workplaces to get sort of, not that we're using people, but to be efficient, to get the most out of their team, we have to remember to build in breaks.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also said that work goes beyond 9 to 5, and that we need to rethink work from a physics standpoint as a force multiplier and a displacement sort of an object, my friend. And I'm wondering, I'll use myself as an example. So, Tony, I am a recovering email perfectionist. Okay, every time an email came into my inbox, I wanted to answer it, but I'm learning that people don't respond to their emails after 5 o'clock. So one thing that I've done to sort of regulate myself is that if it's not in my inbox or not on my schedule, I don't agree to do it, and I stop answering emails after 4:30 to try to give myself the regulated sort of force multiplier effects of not always being on, the always being on culture. So how do you think physics as a force multiplier needs to be applied to work, and how people can realize that work does go beyond their 9 to 5 and how to balance it? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
No, I love it. Right, it's hard to turn off. Right, it's like you said. I love how you said recovering email perfectionist. That's absolutely hilarious. So yeah, the way I define work is from the physics definition, as you kind of stated there. It's a force multiplied by the displacement of an object. And the reason why I just defined that, and I'll go that into a minute, is I get tired of these when people ask me, "What do you do?" And the reason why I don't like that question is because our answer is what we say, the thing that trades time for money. But that doesn't tell me a lot about who you are. It tells me only one hat that you wear. And so I don't like looking at work as the thing you do to trade time for money. I like to think of it as, from a physics standpoint, because we're all subjected to the laws of physics, is that, I like to think of it when you wake up in the morning, right? What's the first thing acting on you? It's not your phone that you want to see. That's another force, psychological force. but it's gravity. Gravity is a force that's pulling us down every single day. And we have to do work to move our hands and feet to fight gravity. So we're literally fighting gravity every day. So that's work. But then now using kind of the play on words with psychology, yeah, now you've got the whole thing about your phone, fear of missing out. Now there's work to understand if I need to critique my email a little more or not send emails out after 5 or answer emails off after 5. Like that's work as well. And I think, what you were kind of saying is like, people, I do believe in work-life balance, but I don't believe that we separate. I think we've equated work and life as this like, okay, we're going to put effort into work and life, we're going to do nothing, relatively speaking, right? We're going to do life is like retirement. Life is like sitting on a beach. Life is like getting a massage, which is part of things too, right? We talked about recovery and release in the flow stages. But to me, you're always doing work. As long as we have our breath and our heartbeats on this planet, you're always going to be doing work.
Yeah, and Tony, I'm curious to ask you about habits and, putting systems in place to make work easier and less stressful. So for me, Tony, I'm a speaker, and my speaking coach always says to listen to the market and believe in the systems you put in place to make your life easier. So I'm wondering your thoughts on creating, a habit tracker to make sure that you're staying on task and really putting yourself into what I call an acceptable schedule of tolerance, my friend. So how do you think we can get more people to accept the idea of an acceptable schedule of tolerance? What are your thoughts then?
I mean, again, Kevin, going back to your sports like experience here. I mean, can you imagine an athlete showing up to a game where they didn't have the habit of practicing? So it's like we got to have habit built in. We got to have this discipline to practice certain things. And I guess like if you were to look at my calendar, it's actually quite hilarious in the sense one time someone said to me, "You've even structured your social time with your friends? Like why are you so structured?" And the way I think about it is this. So Zig Ziglar, the self-help legend, once said that he was kind of answering a sort of a comment that people were making is that people say they want to be free. They want to be able to do what they want to do. And he said, well, the problem with that kind of thinking is that when you take a train off the tracks, it's free, but it doesn't go anywhere, right? So to me, the calendar provides structure. So when I'm with my friends, I know in the back of my mind that I plan this time to be with my friends or family. So then when I'm done with this sort of not task at hand, but when I'm done with, the experience, the event or whatever, now I can go do the other things. And I think the problem that we have today is that if we don't decide what we're going to be doing, we have this thing called the paradox of choice, right? There's so many choices and options out there. If we don't find the discipline to decide what we're going to do during the day, we're going to get swept along in the day, right? And we want to be pulling the day along with us, not having it push us around. So I really believe habits and that discipline is very critical to any success, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tony, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this because USA Today, they released a study last year that said nearly a quarter of American workers are experiencing and struggling with burnout. And they said that millennials reported the highest levels of stress. Now, this USA study surveyed 3,000 U.S. adults, and it found that nearly 30% of millennials said that they were struggling with burnout earlier this year. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on those findings, and how can we help younger people embrace an easier and more acceptable balance at work? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
I guess first off, Kevin, I'm gonna be honest with it. I thought the statistic would have been higher. Like you said,
Fair enough. Yeah.
30%. But I mean, I feel like people are just burning hardcore today. So maybe they didn't really answer it right in the survey. Um, but in terms of like kind of the prevention, it really goes back to the phone, right? And it's interesting that you said millennials was part of that statistic. And I guess like me being a millennial, I'm 38 years old, and I can feel, I guess, because I've of course burned out. I've definitely burned out to the point where I was in the doctor's office and they were hooking me up with these electrodes to my chest because I was so stressed at my current situation in life that I just was breaking down physically. And, I think that that's really because, well, I guess for millennials, and not to blame our parents, right? I'm not saying that. But like, we're taught these certain things growing up, right? We're taught that we are to get a degree, to get a job, to get married, and in 40 years retire, right? And what I'm finding is that, okay, like my friends are getting married, they're getting jobs, they've gotten degrees, and now they're like, well, wait a minute. What's this 40-year gap here of like now I'm going to retire and live my life? And so I think like what's happening that I've seen, and this is kind of speculation, right? This doesn't apply to everybody, but it's like they see, okay, my next destination in life's, is supposedly this thing called retirement, this arbitrary age of 65. And people are working hard to like take shortcuts around it, to hack the system, to put more money in their 401k or start their own business because they think the dream is doing that to make a lot of money or to play the lottery. And, when you do all that work and you don't get the results right away, it's frustrating. It can lead to potential burnout because think of it, day in day, you're playing the lottery and you're thinking about retirement, but it's so far away. And I guess like one thing to get out of that mentality is to really step back and just say, this is what I do with my brother, Kevin, every night is I'll text him three things that I'm appreciative of. And what that does is it changes the language in my mind in the sense that I appreciate what I've done today. Yes, I can do better tomorrow and look to the future and still have goals. But let me remind myself that I did three things that I'm really proud of today. And I think that's what people need to do today so they don't burn out tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about success, my friend, because I know that you believe it's not a matter of good luck, but a product of good skills, including consistent effort and the mindset you need to bring to every task. I know that you have a philosophy of how you do anything as how you do everything, which guides both your leadership, life, and craft, my friends. So I'm wondering if you could expand on that philosophy and what do you think people need to know about it?
Yeah, so success isn't a matter of good luck, it's good skills. Comes from a couple different places. So my advisor in college literally said that to me one day when, taking ready to take thermodynamics and, phase transformations. I was a material science engineer undergrad at UConn. And he basically said that, to be successful, you have to get good at certain skills. And so Gary Player, a professional golfer now in the Hall of Fame as well, he said something similar, right? The harder I practice, the luckier I get. And so I think like going back to what we were kind of talking about before, Kevin, with this idea that people think that success is buying a lottery ticket, winning, and then all their problems are solved. And you put yourself into like the golfer's shoes, right? And can you imagine a golfer, I guess, getting all their clubs and this and that? Okay, now you're a great golfer. It's like, no, you got to develop the skills, right? You got to, practice. You got to like, and I think that's what I love about that saying. What it reminds me is that if I want to be successful, there's a little bit of luck involved too, right? If I hit a golf ball and it hits a tree and it stays in bounds, that's a little bit of luck. But let's face it, the skill was me still hitting the golf ball. So I really believe that the power, the ownership, the responsibility is on the person to develop that skill.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tony, let's talk about designing a life worth living. I always tell people when I talk to people that we make time in life for the stuff that we prioritize. And the only way we prioritize things is by having our own level of expectations. So tell me, Tony, for you, what does it mean to design a life worth living, my friend?
Yeah, I love that. So, you know, designing a life worth living to me is built upon this saying that I learned, years ago when I first started my little journey in, quality aerospace, automotive manufacturing, engineering. And that my boss years ago told me this simple saying that say what you do and do what you say. And so when the years when spending time in manufacturing, going through audits, different customer visits and whatnot, and just looking at performance trends, was that when you follow the simple principle of say what you do what you say, and you design that philosophy into everything you do, into the people's mindsets, into the procedures, into the process, you saw great results because it was just like reflection of, again, it's very simple. You're going to write out what you're going to do and you're going to do what you say. And so the way I do it in my life is I don't necessarily have a procedure for everything in my life, but I do have a couple books that remind me of the things that I'm saying that I want to do in my lifetime. So when I pick these books up again, I say, oh, that's right. I need to be doing these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tony, as you know, I was born with cerebral palsy, and part of my life work is making sure that people with disabilities and people who look like me have an equal shot at the workforce. But if you look at the statistics, only about 22.5% of people with disabilities are employed on a regular basis compared to 65% of non-disabled individuals, my friend. And I'm curious for you, how do you think people with disabilities can engineer a sustainable future in the workforce? And how do you think we can erase the attitudinal barriers that organizations still have about hiring folks with disabilities? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
I guess first off, Kevin, I'm super impressed and, I'm just again honored to be on the show. Like the effort you've done to do what you're doing with what you were born with is amazing. I look up to people like you in all honesty because most people complain about, oh, I don't have my car and I don't have these things. And it's like there's so many other things that we could be focusing on. And I think like with your energy, your passion for how you approach life, that's what I love, right? And the unfortunate part is like you're kind of alluding to is that you get judged like a book does its cover, right? And I think that what people need to start seeing is that we have to look at people's potential, not their limitations. And that's hard sometimes, right, for people because they have all these sort of biases, they have all these sort of insecurities. And I think like what needs to really happen is first off, people need to do the reflection on their own. They need to, become aware of who they are. Their deep, dark thoughts they have to sort of grapple with. And when you can do that on a personal level, I really believe when you start seeing people with these things that have shaped their lives, these experiences, you can start to relate, right? And show empathy towards these people. And you just say to yourself, they're still human beings. They're still trying to figure out life. They're still trying to like do these awesome things. I shouldn't be judging so harshly on them.
Yeah, and I want to go back to something we talked about earlier about the idea of active listening because, Tony, there's a side of my office that says that no matter how many degrees you have on a wall, you can always learn something from somebody else. So, in the spirit of active listening, I also wanted to ask you about active implementation because no matter how many years you went to school, you can always learn something from somebody else. So, talk to me about the active implementation of ideas because it's important to go beyond listening when you're an organizational leader, isn't it? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
I love it. I mean, you kind of tied up, Kevin, the say what you do what you say, right? So the listening side is almost like, you're hearing someone say it, but you just said it really well. Active implementation. Now let's go do it. And I think that's what's interesting today, right? Again, I'm going to go back to the phone. Like, yes, get excited, post that you're going to start a podcast or run a race or whatever on your Instagram or Facebook, but then do it, right? The process, that's what we got to learn to love. We're so fixated in our hustle culture of crossing the finish line and getting our selfie and hashtags right to post and get our likes. We forget the miles we've run. So I've run 12 marathons. And yeah, the feeling of crossing a finish line is great, but I had to actively move my left and right foot for 26.2 miles. And like, you actually enjoy the process. I actually enjoyed the races more than I did crossing. Sometimes I never wanted it to end. And so I think you hit something really solid, Kevin, in that, yes, we want to say these things that we're going to do in our lifetime, but more importantly, do them, actively implement them.
Yeah, and to that point, you talk a lot about purposeful work and operational excellence, going back to that systems mentality and building a better way of working and living, my friend. How do you believe these concepts are sort of interconnected in the world of work today, my friend. What else do you want to share with me in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of building on again, say what you do what you say, right? I think like in terms of that purposeful work, if you really say what you're going to do and then do it, that's going to lead to that operational excellence because you're, saying the work that you're going to do and now you're doing it. And, it's for the better ways of sort of working and living. Again, I believe that you can adopt that philosophy to anything that you do. And some of you might be thinking, listeners, saying like, well, my workplace sucks or whatever. So there is an element to that. And I'm going to go back to sports because I know you love sports, Kevin. So I'm a big soccer fan. And so Barcelona versus Real Madrid in La Liga, they're rivals, right? But they both play soccer. There's two different philosophies for the game, different approaches. And to me, I guess for those that are frustrated with their work or not sure on how to do purposeful work, I think the first thing is to, yes, recognize number one, are you playing the right sport? Right. Right. If you don't like soccer, then you should go play American football or whatever. But then you got to find your team. And there is something to be said about finding your tribe, about finding your team. And that's going to really, really make the difference.
Yeah, and you say something very interesting. You say burnout isn't, a weakness; it's a design flaw. And we've talked about that earlier. But I want to tell you, Tony, I'm 37, and I'm holding on to the title of veteran young guy for as long as I can. Okay, but I want to ask you about, you know, bur- uh, not taking your work so seriously that you don't enjoy the ride. Because my parents remind me all the time, no matter how much money you make, you can't take it with you when you die. So talk to me about, enjoying work while also being cognizant of the things that are draining you. How can we enjoy the process of not burning out? I guess is the question, my friend.
Yeah. No, I love it, Kevin. So one of the things, a simple thing that I like to bring up, it's a subtle shift in language. And I'm going to go over an example here. So typically in manufacturing, right, we don't want to have bad product, right? We don't want to scrap things. And, but the metric is usually less than whatever, say 5%. But here's my problem with that sort of thinking is that we're overlooking the 95% of what you're doing well, right? So to me, that's sort of the design flaw in terms of companies where it's like, okay, yes, it's like, okay, Tony, what's the difference between saying 5% and 95%? And to me, it's very different because if I tell you, Kevin, like, oh, you got to do, 5%, like, and just be like, you got to get better, get it to zero, perfect, this and that versus like, okay, Kevin, you're at 95%. How do we get you doing just a little bit better? You're already doing super great. How do we get you to 96%, 97%? And I feel like there's like more encouragement and motivation coming from that angle versus the 5% because people get fixated. Well, oh man, how do I get to 4% and 3? And I've just seen people burn out from looking at the numbers like that. So just simple way to kind of change the same thing that we're looking at, but to me, make it more, I want to say like impactful and more motivational for people to improve and to almost have fun with it, right? It's almost like saying, okay, how do I get a little bit better? And you could argue how is 5 getting to 4 better, but to me, I like the angle of looking at what you're good at now. How do we improve that versus what you're not necessarily good at and fixing that?
Yeah, absolutely. And, Tony, I'm curious to ask you about being a high performer and always wanting to reach a goal because you believe that high performers are the first to burn out when we're talking about a workplace scenario. But I'm curious to ask you why you believe that and what's the difference between having workplace ambition and not going so far that you're burned out trying to achieve that ambitious goal. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, again, when you put a high performer in the context of a hustle culture, I mean, you think of like, I mean, you're flooring the gas pedal, right? And it's like, to me, as it's interesting that you say high performer, Kevin. I know I've said it as well, But it's like, I don't think of myself. And again, I've burned out. People have told me, my brother has a hashtag for me. He says I'm hyper productive because, I balance my 9 to 5 job. I have a podcast. I've in the process of finishing 2 books. I'm doing my PhD part time. I teach yoga and I have a relationship, on the outside, my girlfriend and I. And so it's not that like I like want to say, oh, Tony, you're so awesome at filling your day. It's really like, to me, the performance is in living your life. I mean, to me, again, I forget what it's from, but all the world's a stage. I don't know if it's Shakespeare or not. And to me, when you wake up, you're performing. And I don't mean like acting and not being genuine or fake, but I think like, what happens when you put the word high performer on there, it's like it has this sort of tone. Not that you did that, Kevin, but I'm just saying like when you say high performer, it's almost like I don't like that sort of differentiation, I guess, because to me, people, when they wake up, they're all doing work, like I mentioned to you. We're all fighting gravity. We've all got these psychological forces. So, in terms of performance, it's all sort of relative, right? It's all relative because, the work that you do as a swimmer is different than the work that you do on a golf course. So, which one is a high performer, right? And I guess, like, to me, yeah, I guess that's it. Like, just you have to. I guess I don't like the word high performer. I guess that's it. And I know people call me that, and I struggle sometimes to kind of like say, well, wait a minute. It's not that I'm trying to get so much done. It's that I'm just so excited to live. That's where it really comes from.
Yeah, and you say people that may like their job, but not the work associated with it. They don't need a new job. They just need a new relationship or a new perspective. And we've talked about a little bit about that. But what do you think it means to have a new relationship with your job, to put it in the proper perspective? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, a great example, right? Say someone's working at their desk, and they got a computer and a mouse and keyboard, and they're complaining that oh, I want to be an artist, I want to do these whatever things and create stuff. And the first thing you think about is like, okay, well, what is an artist, right? They have a medium and they're just using that medium to create something. So who's to say that when you are at this job that you don't like, that you could start integrating the skills that you do like in the job that you have. So if you've got a keyboard and a mouse, and a computer, you can do art, right? Think of your emails when you were crafting them, right? You're almost doing like art. You're trying to craft a certain email to get it to read a certain way. So I don't think people necessarily need a new job every time they get frustrated, or pissed off about their work. I think it's really, the relationship to work and looking at it like, okay, I have this task to do. What are the skills that I am good at that I like to do? How can I integrate it to what I'm doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And my next question has to do with motivation, because I believe as someone personally who lives with a disability every day, that personal or internal motivation is important because you have to master. I'm living in a world that quite frankly doesn't want me to succeed. And I'm not saying that to be harsh. I'm just saying the societal barriers that are put in place. I have to fight more than most people. And I want to ask you about motivation in the context of mastery, because if I'm not internally motivated based on the stuff that I have to deal with from a societal perspective on a daily basis, having a disability, I'm already fighting a war that people don't want me to win. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on motivation and, the uh, the mastery of sort of inner strength when we're thinking about work. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, first off, Kevin, I'm saying you're doing a great job at overcoming this war against these people not wanting to succeed because I think you're killing it, man. So good job for that. I think you're doing a motivation for sure. But I mean, let's face it. I mean, motivation's hard, right? And bringing it back to the my time when I was running these marathons, it's like It sucks. I'm going to be honest with you. It was like sometimes during whatever mile it was hard to motivate myself. And one of the things I like to kind of keep telling myself is that motivation is not permanent, but I have to keep telling myself that it is, right? So you have to just repeat this idea that, okay, this sucks that I have to like fight this battle. People look at me like I have this disability and they don't want me to succeed. But you know what? I can do this because I've proven to myself I can, right? And the same thing when I was running the race. It was like, okay, I knew I could put my right foot in front of my left. I knew I could put my left foot in front of my right. And you just have to keep telling yourself, and it sucks. And I think, like, in terms of like the concept of mastery, I really believe that it takes, I don't know what the saying is, the African proverb, where it's like, you go further with a tribe than you do yourself. And I think, you probably surrounded yourself, Kevin, with amazing people to support you. And I think that's what it comes down to. When people want to find the motivation, we got to surround ourselves with people that are motivated, right? That's why you go to the gym. When I was running a lot, I went to the gym and I was running with people that were way better than me at running. They could run 100-mile races and did triathlons and all these things. And I think when you surround yourself with that sort of energy, that's going to help you get motivated and to master the skills that you're working on in that particular moment.
Yeah, Antonio, I've got two questions left, and the first of those two
Yeah.
questions is this, my friend. I'm curious because I'm a big believer in the power of self reflection and really having something that you're interested in outside of work. For me personally, of course, it's swimming and walking and lifting weights and doing a podcast outside of speaking and doing all of the stuff that I do to advocate for folks with disabilities. But I'm curious to ask you, how important do you think it is that organizational leaders encourage their employees to find hobbies outside of work and do that self reflection on what brings them back? The old saying is you can't fill somebody else's cup until you fill your own. So, how do you think it's
Yep.
important that organizational leaders encourage their employees to self reflect, find hobbies, and find their why outside of work? My friend, how important do you think that is?
I mean, Kevin, I think you just stated the reason, right? I mean, you got to fill your own cup before you can give energy, pour your energy into others. And I think you said that very well. And that comes down to doing the personal things that you like to do. And I think the fact that you do your swimming and your weightlifting, that helps you be a better podcaster, right? To show up in these spaces. And I think it's very critical. And you didn't throw in there, which I loved because I'm biased. You didn't say, oh, I spent, 3 hours on my social media, right? So that's not doing that personal time. That is your interest and whatnot. I mean, it kind of is, I guess, in some sense. I guess you could say Instagram is a hobby. But I think like the activities you talked about, that's what we really need. And to me, when you look at, again, going back to the concept of flow, swimming, walking, weightlifting, I mean, those are flow activities, right? When you get going, you're in the zone. When one of my sort of interests, Kevin, is hitting golf balls when the weather's nice. Here in New England, we only get so many good months of weather here to play golf. But my sort of meditation and my interest, I guess call it hobby too now, is golf. And I love hitting golf balls in the driving range on a nice day, and it just allows me to just kind of find myself again. I don't know how else to kind of put it. You just are allowed to like fill your cup again. I like how you kind of stated that. So I believe it's really important for people to do that today.
Yeah, my final question for you has to do with life and legacy. I know that you're an adventure seeker. You like to do a lot of extreme stuff to keep yourself active, like yoga and golf, and you run marathons, you host a podcast. And by the way, I think one of the best secrets of success stories. So I've recorded now over 1,200 episodes
Mm,
for
I
this
love it.
podcast, and
I love it. Nice, man.
one of the secret weapons that have every time before I start a podcast is to stay hydrated, drink lots of water because
Yeah.
they talk a lot, right? So I'm curious, where does your sense of adventure come from? in both life, doing those extreme sort of sports things, for podcasting, and in life in general? And how do you want your overall legacy to be defined, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
Man, yeah, that's a talk about an existential sort of like that. Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, Kevin, I've been thinking a lot about the differentiation of doing versus being. And what do I mean by that? We can do a lot of things, right? We can, we get up each day, as I said, fight gravity, fight the alarm clock. We brush our teeth, we eat breakfast, whatever. We go work out, yada yada. We do our work. And, I guess when I think of my life, I want to, yes, I'm doing these things, but more importantly for me, it's about who am I being, right? And where I kind of get the sense of adventure. It's like, okay, well, if I put myself in this situation, like podcasting or writing books or this PhD, who am I going to be in this, right? I think the thrill is to kind of like, it's like again, I love sports in the sense of like I'm practicing every day, and I don't know when the game is. That's what's interesting about life, but life is a game in some sense, and I'm practicing every day to live my best life. And I think that's kind of what I enjoy most about waking up every day and getting this chance to be in this amazing world. And I just like step back, we're literally floating on a rock in space around a fiery ball that's going to like blow up one day. I mean, it's like, it's just sort of like you start looking at it in terms of that lens. Yes, the day to day is going to suck when you got people thinking you're going to be a failure and this and that. But when you just take a deep breath, and look at a nice thing in nature, you just say to yourself, man, life is sweet, and I just want to be a part of this for as long as I can, the time that I'm given.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, Tony, tell me, if people want to get connected with you, what's the best way they can listen to your podcast and get connected with you personally, my friend?
Oh, yeah, no, thanks, Kevin. So yeah, work sucks, but I like it.com. There's a page you can, check out the podcast there and, shoot me an email if you got any questions, things that you're frustrated about work. I love to kind of help people work through those. But yeah, Kevin, it's been an honor.
Well, Tony, I want to thank you for bringing balance to the workplace and our relationship with work, and for engaging in conversation with me this afternoon. It's most appreciated, my friend.
No, thank you, Kevin, and thank you, listeners.